Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another fantastic episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host today, ObjectivelyDan, and this is the call-in show where we talk to people about what they believe and why. Fridays live at 7 p.m. Central every single week. And every single week, I always have a special guest. This week is no different. It's Alice Greczyn calling in today. Alice, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Alice, you are a cool person. You are one of the few guests that I've had that has an IMDB page. You are an actress, you are a writer, and you do a bunch of stuff. So please tell us about yourself.
I do a bunch of stuff. So I started acting when I was 17. And that carried me mostly, that's pretty much been the bulk of my adult career. I'm 36 now, and for the past few years, I took some time away from acting to focus on writing. In that time, I published my memoir about growing up in and leaving evangelical Christianity. And now I find myself doing a bunch of other things. I also founded a organization called Dare to Doubt, which is a resource site for other people who are questioning their faith or who have left it and could use a little bit of help finding support, whether it's a peer group, a meetup group in their local area, or more clinical support, like mental health care or crisis aid if you need like a safe place to stay for the night because your family kicked you out because they found out you're gay or something. So yeah, I built that resource site 3 years ago, and that kind of put me in this lovely space with you folks.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we were just talking about this a little bit before the show, and I want to talk about your story, but you've been an atheist for a couple of years now. You've been an atheist, it's only 15 years, but you only recently came out publicly in the last few years, I guess around the time when you started building that resource. So I definitely want to talk about that story as to how that happened. But first, let's go back to the very beginning. So you grew up in an evangelical home, right? So what was that like?
So that was all I knew. I was born to Christian parents who had leadership positions in the church. And then when I was a toddler, we were overseas in Asia. My parents were missionaries. So from before I can remember, Christianity was all I knew. And we were non-denominational Christian, but the kind that today the media would call evangelical. We were the don't have sex before marriage kind, the pray the gay away kind, and Republican leaning. And so by today's check boxes, we would hit a lot of them for the evangelical descriptor.
Sounds about right to me. Yeah.
So on top of that, I was homeschooled my entire life until I went to college, and that added an extra layer of insulation from the outside secular world. And then I was missionary bound myself. And long story short, I truly believed God was calling me to acting. And so that's how I ended up in Los Angeles acting. And a few years later, I lost my faith, just like they said I would. I went to the heathenish.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to lose your faith, Los Angeles is probably the place to do it, right?
Oh, yeah, I had a grand old time. I mean, I had some not grand old times too, but I had a grand old time.
That's also what would happen too, right? You would have the highs and lows would both be in the Los Angeles area, I imagine. Well, so that's really interesting. So I'm looking at your IMDb. So is this around the time, you were on CSI Miami? What is this? Do you have an idea between projects which you were when this was happening for you?
So when I lost my faith, it was around 2007, I believe. And oh man, I want to say I was a recurring guest star on an ABC family show called Lincoln Heights. back then. Now
Okay.
ABC Family is Freeform. They've had a network rename since that time. I was also working on a show called Privilege that was on CW. And it was shortly before I played an Amish girl on Rumspringa in a movie called Sex Drive. And
Whoa.
that was a personal win for me booking that role, because she had a very religious background. Obviously, I was in full-on Amish wardrobe, and Rumspringa, for anyone who doesn't know, is when the Amish teenagers kind of get to experience the pleasures of the world, consequence-free relatively, before 90-something% of them end up joining the church and committing to the church, mainly so they won't be shunned from their families. And so that was a really fun role. It was a raunchy teen sex comedy too. And so it was like really fun playing this girl who had like, she was going through all of this deep like reckoning and depth to her, but yet she was just having a grand old time.
So let me ask you this. So you're in Hollywood, right? I mean, you're doing all the movies and stuff. Do your parents not have concerns that you would end up like exactly where you are today, talking to me on like a show about your atheism and stuff? Like what was that like?
So, funnily enough, and people are always surprised, and I totally understand why, my parents were super supportive of me moving out to LA, largely because they believed God was calling me to this too. We all kind of believed that these were doors that God was opening. And I mean, the signs were unmistakable, like I found out that I couldn't finish nursing school in the state of Colorado because they raised the age. I was in college at a pretty young age, only because I got a GED because I was homeschooled. So I was in college at 15. Colorado changed the age to 18 to be able to go into nursing school. And so I had like a year and a half to kill before I could officially start nursing school and be a missionary nurse and save bodies and souls for the Lord.
Oh my goodness.
So that was me. And so while the doors to nursing were closing, God was opening these doors to Hollywood. I kept getting approached by talent scouts and modeling agents, and eventually a talent manager from LA met with me, and he was like, "Oh, I've got great instincts. You've got a great look. Come out." And I'm like, "You've never even seen me act. I don't want to act. Like, I'm nervous enough being on camera without saying anything."
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, it was, but it just seems
that sounds a little, side note, that sounds a little predatory. So it's basically just going off your looks, right?
Looks and instincts. To be fair, this is the same guy who discovered Kristen Stewart. He's the same guy who discovered, like, I mean, I do think, just as there's some people can tell, like, in a snap, whether a painting is a fake or not, I do think that some people just have a good instinct on reading. Casting directors are going to like you. Whether you're talented or not, let's give you a shot.
Like, I'm going to say you probably know more about this than I do. That's I'll say that's fair. But what if I hear like, "Oh,
it does sound predatory.
You look great in the movies, kid." Like, that's what I'm hearing. It's like,
it definitely had that vibe. You're not mistaken. You're not mistaken. No, but my parents were super protective of me, and they came out here with me. My mom and siblings did for the first couple months until I got settled, and then they went back to Colorado. And I was here on my own at 17, and people are always like, "How on earth did your parents like let you do that?" And it's like, because when you really believe that something is the calling of God, like, and plus my parents are pretty radical people. We can get into that, but they never beat the Christian drum the way they were supposed to. They were always getting trouble within their churches for their own interpretations and expressions of walking what faith meant to them. And so it didn't surprise them at all that God would call me to the brokenness of Hollywood instead of the more traditional brokenness of, say, India, which is where I thought I was bound. So,
I mean, like, if you want to help communities, I love how Hollywood's the real battleground, right? Like, I don't know. That's really...
Hollywood's extremely influential too. So like, if you can save the hearts of Hollywood, like, I suppose one could argue there's a trickle down effect. I mean, look at the Biebers, for instance. I wonder how many people they've inspired to come to Christianity, or at least stay in Christianity.
That's a good point. I wonder how bad of an influence that is as well. I wonder, because, that's another thing where, I mean, we won't get into it, but there is kind of this industrial complex of like celebrity pastors and celebrity Christians who are part of these mega churches and stuff. And I guess you weren't a part of that complex, but it is interesting to hear these stories. At least you didn't go into like Scientology, right? So
Yeah, I thought about it. I
Yeah.
did the little quiz or whatever. Like, yeah,
Oh, did you?
I'm a quiz junkie. If you give me a quiz, I'll take it. But no, I had enough fun.
That is so funny. It's like, yeah, I just love the quizzes. That's
Yeah.
what really got me into Scientology, and then everything else, you know.
Yeah, it
That's
wasn't
really
the drug
funny.
detox program. It wasn't
No.
the promises of connections with movies. It was the personality quizzes. But I also had enough friends who either were in Scientology or who had left Scientology or flirted with Scientology, who allowed me to peek behind the curtain maybe a little sooner than I might have if I didn't know them.
Yeah.
One of
That's
my really good friends who actually contributed to me leaving Christianity, he was a Scientologist. And he was one of the kindest, most thoughtful, generous people I knew. He took care of me when I was sick. He was just such a sweetheart, and he was a Scientologist, and I could not reconcile how is he going to go to hell. I just couldn't. So that was he was part of the yarns in my sweater that just kept unraveling.
You know, Alice, I've heard people say, you know, I met this Muslim person and I didn't know how they're going to hell, or I met this atheist and I didn't know how to go to hell. You're the first person I said, where, yeah, I met this nice Scientologist. That is really
nice.
I'm sure they are. Yeah, we've had a couple call into the show, but that's really fascinating. I want one more question about this time of your life. I want to know, did you succeed in your goal of evangelizing anybody? Like, do you think that, like, you know, you did what you set out to do in that respect?
No,
no, not at all.
No. Well, here was my deepest insecurity as a Christian, was I'm very much an introvert. So evangelism comes very unnaturally to me. I was the type of Christian that really liked the quote by, I think it was St. Francis of Assisi, who said, "Preach Christ at all times, and if necessary, use words." I was very much more in the line of thinking of, like, if I just live my beautiful, privileged life, people will wonder, how does she do it? And then I can tell them it's God. So yeah, I just thought people would feel God's love emanating through me. And that was another thing that led to my deconstruction, was realizing how my Christian beliefs only made people feel shitty. It made them feel judged. It made them feel like they couldn't be themselves around me, because I might be offended or they might offend. And so that was another, like, wait, this isn't doing what the pastor said it would do. I was told that if I lived out my faith, people would be drawn to me. And instead, I'm just making people feel alienated and judged because I was alienating and judging them. So not meaning to, but that was the result. My intentions were good.
You're taking the words right out of my mouth for my story, right? I felt the same way, where it's like, you have to, there's a, especially in evangelical spheres, there is a pressure to be the model Christian, right? Like, you want to have the story, you want to have the actions, you want to be able to show up to Sunday school and the youth group and the whatever. Like there's a checklist that you want to be able to face. That's more community based than anything, really. I mean, it's more for your peers than anything else. So I can see how you felt that pressure, but yeah, you're right. It only ends up alienating other people who don't actually live that lifestyle, because they can't be themselves, right?
They can't be themselves. No.
Yeah. So
I never evangelized to anyone. I've been evangelized too, from other Christians in Hollywood, and that's always interesting when that happens, because it's like, But and even when I was a Christian, like, I wasn't the right type of Christian anymore, so they were trying to bring me back into the fold. Oh wait, you froze. I'm gonna wait for you to come back. Well, anyways, while we're waiting for Dan to come back, just for anyone watching, yes, my faith in LA unraveled slowly. When I was 17, the year I moved out here, I also left evangelical Christianity. But for the next 4 years in LA, I was what I would now call a progressive Christian. And LA churches were a hoot for me, because they were so different than the churches of my youth, which focused very heavily on no sex before marriage, and definitely zero tolerance of anything non-cis hetero. And the churches in LA were really tricky, because a lot of them are very progressive and LGBTQ affirming, and I was judging them. They were not actually obeying the Bible. And they were judging me, saying that, I didn't know the true God, the God who's actually of love and equality. And I'm like, I don't know what God you're talking about, because that's not the God of the Bible that I read. So my adventures in the churches of Los Angeles, which were not many, but definitely several, they were confusing. They never left me feeling good. I think the last time I went to a church in LA was I'd seen the documentary called Rise by the photographer director David LaChapelle, and he was famous at the time for directing Christina Aguilera's music video Dirty, and which featured dancers in the crump scene. And so in the documentary Rise, which is all about the history of crump dancing in LA and clowning, a lot of them were religious, and they were talking about how their dance was like a channeling of the Holy Spirit. And I grew up in very heavily Pentecostal expressions of Christianity with much spirit slaying. And so that documentary made me feel something. It was like, maybe I should give church another shot. And like, maybe the Holy Spirit is okay with me wearing a string bikini and camo pants and like dancing. So I went to a Baptist church here in LA. And it was nothing like in the movie Rise. Granted, I didn't go down to Compton or Inglewood, but I just went to somewhere in the Valley. But yeah, that was the last time I think I ever gave church in LA a shot.
Don't remember the Bible verse that mentions fashion, but it could be in there, right? I mean,
there's a few. There's ones about, women don't adorn your hair and fancy braids and pearls. Right. Women cannot dress as men cannot dress as women. There's a few, but yeah, it's not quite as rigid as some sects of religion interpret, to my opinion.
Yeah. Well, while we were having just a little bit of fixing things in the background, maybe we can shout out our patron of the week. Is that something we can do while we're getting our wonderful host Dan back up here? Because if you didn't know, every single week we get to shout out a patron that donates through tiny.cc/PatreonTW for supporting this wonderful show. And this week's patron of the week is, drumroll, going, and Jay Goo. Thank you so much, and we apologize if we did not pronounce that correctly. But Jay, we really, really appreciate you donating, and everyone else that is out there and contributes to these awesome shows here at the ACA. I think we are about ready to take a call, but we might have Dan back, and I am sure everybody is excited to see him. So, but if not, we can grab a call and move along. Let's start with Jessica in Texas. She, her. Jessica is an ex-theist, and she is a therapist in the Bible Belt, it sounds like. So, Jessica, it sounds like you and Alice might have something to talk about, being ex-Christians and whatnot. Yeah, how are you? Thanks for coming on.
Hey, I'm doing great. I'm really excited. Thanks, Alice, for sharing some of your background, and I feel a lot more, at home with a similar story. Yeah, so I'm calling in because I really don't even have a question. I just need support. I am also in Texas, and I work with couples. I'm like helping them deal with like sex issues or infidelity, like really sensitive topics that Christianity has a lot of messages about. And so I notice as I'm deconstructing my own faith, like just being super triggered all the time with like how stark, like the misogyny, the like sexual shame that like women are taught to carry around. Yeah, the hierarchical nature of like what marriage is supposed to be, and like God's, fingers all up in growth process, I guess, in a way that actually kind of hinders me trying to do my job. And so I'm just wondering if I can get some, I don't know, like support, or it even just feels good calling in and hearing all that.
Well, yes. Hi, Jessica. I'm back. Hi, everybody. Fun times.
And welcome.
This is thank you. I'm going to yell at my internet provider very soon, because this is the second time I've had issues connecting online while the show is happening. So not a great look for this internet provider, but that's for another time. Let's talk about you, Jessica. So you are a sex therapist. I imagine like half of your clientele are like Christians or ex-Christians, right? I mean, like what's the percentage there? I have to ask.
Yeah, it has to be, I kid you not, like 95% affluent white Christian Southerners.
Wow. You know,
I'm a young black queer therapist.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I figured it would be a pretty high percentage. I didn't realize it would be that high. But I mean, that makes sense, right? Because what other institution in America besides, like, I don't know, like, you know, talking about like organized ideologies, right, where people grow up in communities where these things are the norms. It's one thing to kind of see things on TV and maybe internalize some stuff there, and I'm sure like that kind of happens, but it's another thing to be surrounded by parents, friends, elders, all in the community, also like putting these ideas in your head, right? Like, so for me growing up, like I remember the complementarianism was a big deal. My girlfriend in high school made me read Wild at Heart. I'm sure you're familiar with the book Wild at Heart, right, Jessica? Alice is nodding her head. Okay, so Wild at Heart, for those of you who aren't aware, is basically this whole book that says man has to be the big, strong hunter and provider for the family, and women can be these sort of dainty, sort of basically sidekicks is kind of what I would describe the role that they describe. And I remember even reading that at the time. I was like 17 or 18 thinking, this is kind of BS. Like, I don't want this. Like, I want an equal partnership in my life. And that was like kind of a big difference there, because she felt like these gender roles were very real, but it's just kind of this construct that's built up. So I imagine you deal with a lot of that in your line of work. And I sincerely hope that you can find good outlets besides, you know, calling into this show, of course, to kind of like deal with that in your off time. Because I imagine working with that 8 hours a day can play a big toll on you, right?
Yeah, Jessica, have you heard of the Secular Therapy Project?
So I've heard it from ACA, just as I'm getting to know y'all.
Yeah, so the Secular Therapy Project is an amazing resource, both for you to potentially be on as a therapist who might provide secular help to others, but right now it sounds like for the support you need for yourself too, because it's organized by Recovering from Religion, and Dr. Dale Ray is one of the founders of that. And they have a lot of support for therapists and people seeking therapists to talk about exactly these issues. And I can only imagine being in your shoes, deconstructing, questioning your own faith while also trying to help people who are not, maybe they're deconstructing themselves, maybe not, but the issues that they're presenting are understandably triggering to you. And that's got to, I'd imagine, make it a little bit cloudier to be able to do your job to the best of your ability while you're also trying to manage your own feelings that are coming up through hearing certain things. So I feel deeply sympathetic to you. And I guess I would just recommend, for more professional support, I really would encourage anyone to check out the Secular Therapy Project, because they've done a really good job at providing resources specifically for these things, a lot around sex and sexuality, shame, relationship dynamics, complementarianism, and just overall therapy. And I believe they have a free call-in number on Recovering from Religion if you just want to talk and learn more. I'm pretty sure it's free.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm super therapied up. So I appreciate that. But I have my outside support just ethically, as you know, that's just part of the job. But I think I wanted to call in just to like hear from other voices. Like, I don't know, something about Christianity makes, it's exactly what you were saying, Dan. Like, it makes men internalize this sense of like, you know, entitlement, or just like kind of a warped view of what, you know, malehood is or coupleships are. And so by the time they come to my office, I feel almost like I'm like, you know, I'm doing couples therapy, but also kind of a deconversion therapy. I don't even know, like
deprogramming.
Totally, right, deprogramming, and just knowing like the trauma symptoms that I see aren't just from what's happening in the marriage, but like go all the way back to like your fundamentalist parents, you know, hammering into you, if you take your panties off, then you're a sinner. You know what I mean? Like bathe with your jeans on. And so I just want to, hear from y'all.
Yeah. I'll tell you some more about my life in growing up in that context, Jessica. First of all, I gotta say, Alice is so great with plugging the resources there. Holy shit, Alice, that was fantastic. But just a little bit more about me and my background, Jessica. I don't know if this is common knowledge. I'm not only a Boy Scout, I am an Eagle Scout. So I grew up my whole boyhood years in Boy Scouts and did that, which, as you know, is a Christian organization. A lot of people actually don't know that, I should say. But it was, you know, it very much a Christian organization. There's a reason why they always meet at churches and stuff. They do say that is their belief. They do offer, you know, people of other faiths to go in. But like one of the things for your Eagle Scout Board of Review, which is how you become an Eagle Scout, is they ask you about your relationship with God and stuff. Like some of the questions they ask are with your creator. But that's a side note. What I wanted to point out was, even in the context of groups like this, there were still these gender norms that were kind of put upon me about what it's meant for me to be a man in my community. I remember there was at least this one time where you had a bunch of dudes with their shirts off, like chanting and going around a campfire. And I just remember looking at that being like, this is kind of weird. I don't know if I'm into that. I don't know, like, if that, what does that make me? And I remember thinking, oh man, am I gay because I don't relate to the other young men in my community? It's like, no, I just have different interests. It has nothing to do with my sexuality, nothing to do with who I'm attracted to. But there's another thing there, right? Where it's like, oh, because I don't fit into the cultural norm of what it meant to be a man, that I must have been some sort of other. And that's how, you know, queer people in my community were kind of viewed as. It's kind of an othering sort of thing, right? Like you're either this one or the other. You kind of fulfill one of these roles. So a lot of stuff to break down there and figure out as I got older. Now, those of you who see me, I talk about this. I'm a pretty big dude. I'm 6'5". I never had issues with people, not really people like physically bullying me. Nobody ever really questioned me as a person. You know, are you big enough? Are you tough enough? But again, my interests were kind of different. I was a little bit more nerdy. I wasn't into sports too much. And that in Texas, especially if you're not like into football, you know, like you're kind of an outsider there. So yeah, there's a lot of like experiences with my gender norms and like how I was supposed to view myself in that light that tie into Christianity inherently, because it was just part of the culture that I grew up with. Like you can argue that some of these forces are secular, but I would say that if you ask people what are the root reasons why you believe that these norms exist, that these roles exist for men and women, they're going to point to verses in the Bible. Like if you ask the people in my community why they put this stuff up, like that's the source. That's where they're getting it from ultimately. So that's a lot about me, Jessica. I know you wanted to hear some other perspectives, but there you go. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, Dan. That for me is the part that I carry home with me like the most heavy on my shoulders. Like there's just so much more that you can be outside of the constraints of religion. Like there's just so much more that's true outside of, you know, what I was taught and what my, you know, sounds like y'all were taught and my clients were taught. And so there's these whole parts of yourself that are just caged away. Like it drives me crazy. And here I am trying to like free the psyche, you know, whatever that means. But there are all these like defenses that are baked in from, the time you come out of the womb. Like they're praying over you, they're, buying you a little Bible, they're dressing you up for, Easter.
Yep.
And just never having a chance to be more than what you are is really depressing sometimes.
That's such a great way to put it. And it follows you into adulthood, obviously, too, right? And like I got the, you can't see it because I got these over the ear headphones, but I got this ear piercing. Was it last year now? I can't. Yeah, last year. Has it been that long? Anyway, my mother was furious when she found out I got this, and I kid you not, she said exactly, men do not. I do not like it when men wear piercings. I don't think men should have jewelry. Period, is what she told me. And even though she's fine with the jewelry she wears, she just specifically has this thing where men should not do it as like a normative thing, which of course is only applied to, a very Western idea of history. First of all, I don't even think that's completely true, because I believe people in older times that were men also did in our cultures. But of course, worldwide, that's not true. Of course, there's all kinds of differences there. But where does this construct come from? Well, it comes from, it comes from the pulpit. It comes from preachers and people who are saying that men are supposed to be this way, women are supposed to be this other way. And that's just how it is. That's how God intended it. And now I like playing with that a little bit. That's one reason why I chose to get it. The other thing I chose to get it is because I thought it was cool looking. And I don't have to justify myself. But in Christianity, you kind of do. You kind of have to work with those constructs, which is why it's so difficult it's why people are seeing you, Jessica. It's why they have to kind of figure out how to break that down. I know that like I said, I had to work on that for myself when I was, breaking out of Christianity. So I applaud you for doing the work that you do, because obviously it is hard and it's difficult, and it obviously makes you self-reflect, but you're very brave for doing it, and there needs to be more people like you in the world for doing it. So thank you so much for the work that you do in that regard.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks for taking my call. Do not tell your mom that some men have vaginas. It will blow her mind.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Yeah,
2022.
I haven't even gone there with her, but yeah, I know that's.
I did with my mom recently. I was explaining the difference between cis and trans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I won't even go into it, but one step at a time, right? One step at a time. It starts with the ear piercings,
starting like a couple hundred
and
yards.
It goes into
line.
Yeah. But anyway, hey Jessica, thank you so much for calling in. We really appreciate your call. Yeah, have a good one.
Thank you so much.
What a fantastic way to start the show. What did you think about that, Alice?
Yeah, I mean, I feel so sympathetic. I also couldn't help thinking of this mini series I've been watching on Hulu called Under the Banner of Heaven with Andrew Garfield, where he plays a Mormon LDS police detective investigating a crime that ends up having a lot of fundamentalist FLDS Mormon components to it. And he just has this total unraveling of his own faith as he's trying to solve a faith-based crime.
Whoa.
So that's what her story reminded me of, like being the therapist, giving therapy for people who are also like, she's deconstructing while she's trying to help people, where she can see the religion is the source of a lot of these problems. So it made me think of that.
I didn't know that was a thing. I need to look into that now. That sounds really cool.
It's based off of a true story. John Krakauer wrote a book about it, but yeah, it's based off of a true crime story that took place in the 80s, a grisly murder.
Oh, okay. Well, I need to look into that now. I'm going to add that. I'm literally typing it in as I'm talking here. Sorry. I just want to make sure I have a tab open for later. So that's really cool. So real quickly, before we get to the next call, we actually have a lot of people who want to talk, and that's great. But I feel bad because I was having a little bit of issues at the beginning of the show, and we didn't get to talk about. We talked a little bit about your history, but we're not talking about what you're doing now. So I really wanted to talk about that real quick, just to give context for people on the project that you started. So can you talk about that?
Yeah. So real quick, because this is a call-in show, and I do want to get as many callers in as we can. But real quick, 3 years ago, I started an organization called daretodoubt.org, and it's a resource site. So that's why maybe I'm quick with the resources here. Intended to help people who are either questioning their faith or who have already left their faith. And yeah, it provides different things. And then the other thing that I've been doing, I wrote a book. Did I say this already in our talk before or here on the show?
You talked about that you wrote a memoir. Yeah.
Yeah, I wrote a memoir about my upbringing in Christianity, and then how I found myself an atheist. And I was a very reluctant atheist, and I don't feel like I so much left my faith as I lost my faith. And long story short, I gave God a test and he failed. And that was it for me. And I've just been an atheist ever since. But recently I've been doing a lot of public speaking, which is something I never saw for myself. But there's a lot of really cool conferences and meetups, not just within atheism, but also just people who are either post-religious or questioning in general. And those have been a lot of fun to do, to connect with other people, and also to I've been presenting on 2 topics, purity culture. I was betrothed to a guy when I was 17, and that was why I ended up leaving my faith, was because I disobeyed God and broke off my engagement. And that sort of set me off questioning everything. And then also the neuroscience of mystical experiences, because that is another topic I talk about. Because as I mentioned, I grew up in a very heavily Pentecostal expression of Christianity, and the Spirit never slayed me. I faked praying in tongues and I faked falling to the floor. And so as an atheist, that was one of the things that haunted me, was like, what the hell was that actually?
Yeah.
And it was discovering what that actually was, as much as we know, that allowed me to find peace and like really healthfully move on. It connected a lot of lingering dots. So yeah, that's my nutshell of kind of like where I've come from and what I do now.
What a fantastic nutshell! My goodness, very succinct, very
I'm
good.
trying to get better at it.
It's great. Like, because I wanted to talk a little bit more about. But one more thing I want to ask you before we get to calls, because again, like I thought we kind of started to have this conversation before the show, and I thought this was interesting for viewers to know, because again, you first deconverted, around 2007 is what you said, but you just started creating these resources and stuff about 3 years ago. Yeah. And now you're out and now you're talking about, so why the distance in time? What's the thought process there? Was it you wanted to feel like you're still figuring stuff out, or you didn't feel like you had a place in the atheist community in particular? Can you talk about that a little bit?
So there's definitely different reasons. The first reason that comes to mind is I did not want to think about or talk about God at all. I needed some like distance from it. The term deconstruction didn't exist back then for what we call in the sense that we use it in these spaces. I was scared to death of anyone who had the slightest hint of faith, any faith. That included faith in spirit guides, crystals, Hindu, Buddhist meditation practices. If you believed in anything spiritual, I couldn't trust myself around you, because I didn't trust that I was strong enough to not be suckered back into something out of fear or guilt or an idea of how I should be as a human. So it's not so much that I was afraid of other people, although that's what I would have said at the time. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to stand up to them if they pressured or even just invited me into something. And so I was leery of atheist spaces too, because to me, the problem, and I maintain this, is herd mentality, is groups, is communities. I don't like being part of groups, and I don't like being part of communities. Sure. I use the word loosely because, it's a useful term, but and again, that partly had to do with just understanding the human dynamics of humans. When we group together, we tend to like hierarchies, and hierarchies, to my way of thinking, often lead to abuses of power. And if that's what I don't want in any sphere, religious or not, I don't want to be part of a group. I don't want to be part of a community. And so, and many people who leave their faith struggle with being able to trust people and trust a community again. And again, I was very introverted too, so I didn't really feel like I was missing any of that. I didn't miss church at all. I know a lot of people miss church when they leave or get excommunicated. I didn't miss that at all. So that was a large reason why I wasn't open about my atheism, nor did I seek out any support or friendships with other people who are atheists. The other part would be more professional. I was acting quite a bit around that time. That was one of the busiest parts of my career. And when over 70% of the United States is Christian, or at least they profess to be.
Nominally, right? Yeah.
You're not a very bookable actor if you're openly an atheist, because what producer is going to want to cast you when you're openly critical of the belief system of the majority of their viewers. There's like Christians that maybe wouldn't watch a show just because it had an atheist actor on it. And that's understandable. I was that type of Christian. So I think that had a lot to do with it as well, in terms of like kind of staying in the atheist closet. I was worried about how it might affect my career. And again, I just didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to have people ask me these questions like, well, how did you lose your faith? And what type of Christianity were your parents a part of? Because the other crazy component to my story in a nutshell was my parents felt called by God when I was about 11 to 14. My parents felt called by God to be homeless, essentially. And we traveled and lived in campgrounds for a time, and then in the homes of friends and strangers. And so I had a very nomadic homeschooled childhood that was just very hard to explain to people without getting into the religious component of it, which I did not want to get into. So I just didn't talk about it. Yeah, on my end of my screen's gone green. I'm not sure if it's like that on the YouTube, but anyway.
Yeah, just fun stuff happening on the stream tonight.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad that you talked about that part of your story, because like everybody decides to come out for different reasons. Well, everybody decides to leave for different reasons, but everybody also decides to speak out for different reasons, right? And I think this is really important, because what we might call the atheist community, it is in and of itself a very small number of people. The truth is there's probably a lot of people who have had similar thoughts, who've never quite put it into words the same way we have, who haven't read all the books maybe that we have, who haven't had the kind of connections with other people. And so they don't know like how to like effectively communicate that, or they may not be interested in it. They may be like living their lives and are just fine with how they are. For the rest of us, I think it's very uncomfortable to be an atheist, especially in the United States today, and you know, across the world, of course. So like I choose to speak out to make this space more comfortable, to make the world more comfortable for stuff like us. So I'm glad that you talked about some of the struggles that can come up when talking out, because I feel like that affects a lot of people in different ways, and there's a million different reasons why, you know, you wouldn't want to kind of talk about this stuff. So I'm glad that you're deciding to do it now, I guess is what I would really say, because it's I think it's important, you know, obviously, and obviously you do too. So
well, it was when I saw that less than 1% of American women openly identify as atheists that I was like, I gotta come out, because I saw the consequences that would happen to them and their children. If and when they did, like their children wouldn't be invited to birthday parties, they might get questioned or kicked out of school, you know, and it's like, oh my gosh, I know for a fact there are plenty of atheist women. I'm just one of them, but a lot of them, you know, and I totally respect the choice to not come out, because I've been there for my own reasons, but it's like, oh, I'm at a place in life where I feel very secure in myself. I'm no longer worried about getting suckered into another belief system. I'm a lot more comfortable talking about my past. Helped that I was writing my memoir for quite a chunk of that. So that allowed me to kind of put a chronology to it and sort through my initial reactions as I process. So, but yeah, that was a big reason that I came out, was seeing that statistic about women, atheists specifically. And I was like, oh boy, it's time for me to just
it's my time to shine.
If I lose work, then fuck it. That's perpetuating, I'm contributing to the stigma of other actors losing work. And I was okay with like, all right, I mean, my career honestly wasn't doing that great at the time I came out anyway, so the stakes weren't as high, but even if they had been, I like to think I still would have come out then, because it's like, this isn't going to go away unless more people come out.
That's true. Well, again, well done to you for doing that. We have a lot of people who want to talk to you, so we should definitely get to some calls, but before we do that, I just want to give a quick plug for our merch store. If you haven't checked it out, you should look at what we've got. We have a new shirt in the store. New shirt alert. We're trying to do a monthly shirt thing, guys, in case you haven't heard about it. So check it out. We have this new thing it's a little more themed towards the logo of the show. You know, we got a little pull-out tab for Truth Wanted with the little number on there. So if you want to check out that design, check out the link in the description. It's tiny.cc/merchaca. And of course, you can check out all the other stuff. We also have like tank tops and stuff now, which is pretty new, I think. Yeah, pretty new stuff. So if you want to get a good workout in, while rocking the Truth Wanted swag, you can do it now. We have that option for you. So please consider looking at that if you haven't. So let's get back to some calls if you're ready for that. We have a lot of people who want to talk with you. And I've been trying to look at this and see where we should go next. Because there's a couple different options. Do you want to talk to a theist or an atheist, Alice? Alice, I'll ask you that.
Ooh, let's do both. I feel like let's talk to a theist first.
Okay. Let's talk to Jay, who's calling in from Missouri. Jay, you're live on Truth Wanted.
Hi, Jay.
Oh, hello. How are you doing? Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. I just think it's very sad. You guys are very inaccurate on your Bible. How you say that the women are just, basically second-class citizens. And you haven't read a victorious woman who was a businesswoman, and she took very good care of her household. When the Bible says that the man should lay down his life as Christ laid down his life for the woman. So it's saying that the man should sacrifice his life and give everything for his wife and family. So I understand. You guys aren't well read in the Bible, so you know what I mean.
Well,
I think you should just slow down.
That's very interesting claim, Jay.
Exactly what it said.
Very interesting claim. I would say, I could, if you want to play the verse game, we can always point to verses like in 1 Timothy where it says that a woman does not have authority to teach, or we can talk about, really any writings of Paul when he talks about women. But, Jay, besides that, Jay, besides that, here's the thing. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what the Bible says about women. And now that may come as a surprise to you, but what matters is the interpretation. Okay, because everybody has their own interpretation of what the Bible says. But as long as people are interpreting what the Bible is saying as to say, this is how men should be and this is how women should be, that's what's going to actually materially affect me in the real world, right? The truth is, since the book has been written, since the parts of the book have been written at different times, people have been interpreting this stuff and have been influencing their life based on what this book is saying. And now, progressive Christianity has come to a point where it's oh, well, we want to take the good parts of this book and you can kind of reinterpret this because the book still matters for these people. But really, like I said, it ultimately doesn't matter. You have to look at the cultural and material effects of what this book has done. And Jay, you have to agree with me, throughout history, right? Women have not had the same rights as men. Women have not had the same expectations as men. And it's largely due to, in part, in how people have interpreted this book. Why is it that we're a Christian country, but women did not have the right to vote until about 100 years ago? Why? It's because they did not have the social expectations at the time.
That's not has nothing to do with Christianity, sir. Sorry,
absolutely does. Is this not a Christian country where we're not founded on Christian values?
Can I speak? Can I say my voice without?
If you're going to talk about what the Bible says, I'm really not interested, Jay. Despite your claims, I'm very well versed in what the Bible says.
No, you're not. You're. And it's very sad what she was saying too, because if she's faking the Holy Spirit, who does that? I understand people do that, but come on, man.
You know why I did it? Because if I didn't, I would get pushed down the stairs. Pastor pushed me down the stairs because the Holy Spirit wouldn't make me fall over. And I also did it so that people wouldn't know that I must have some hidden sin that meant that God was ignoring me. That's why I faked it. I faked it because if I didn't fake it, I could get physically hurt by the pastors who were praying for me. And also, I've read the entire Bible more than once, front to back, and there are numerous verses talking about the inferiority of women compared to men. There's a verse right now I'm looking at. The men are worth 50 shekels of silver, while women are worth only 30. So many verses about women need to submit and be quiet. That rape victims, female rape victims, are to be stoned if they got raped in the city and didn't scream loud enough for help. Clearly, God has so little value for women. And yes, there are those other verses that you're bringing up about a husband must lay down his life for his wife. And there's also the verses about women must submit to their husbands. and turn the other cheek. And so how do you think those Bible verses are interpreted in a situation where we have domestic violence, where the woman is to submit and literally turn her other cheek because the male is the head of her household? Whether we like it or not, the Bible does say these things, and it is interpreted in these ways. And so I feel like I can agree with both you and Dan here. It's like we can talk Bible, and I know Dan can too, inside and out. But I also agree with Dan's point that we equally need to look at the way the Bible is interpreted and practiced.
Yep.
No. Well, is it my turn to speak now without getting interrupted? Is it?
You might get interrupted, but it is your turn to speak.
Yeah, I know you're going to interrupt me, but it's very sad that when she says turn to the other cheek, nowhere in the Bible was it talking about a woman getting beat up or anything like that. No, that's just, saying, hey, if your enemy, go the extra mile for your enemy. If you read the whole thing, you know what I mean? So once again, you just take everything out of context. And so therefore you're not right if you take everything out of context. So just try to go back and read it again and leave everything in context, because it's like it's very sad. And then there's people that are listening to you and they believe exactly what you say. It's horrible. It's sad. But let me ask you one question. Can I ask you a question?
Well, no, I want to respond to what you said first, because I don't think you actually listened to a single thing that I said or Alice said, because you pointed out one particular verse which you've interpreted a different way, and you've taken that and extrapolated upon that and said that everything that we've ever read in the Bible is taken out of context. And I want to disagree with that wholeheartedly. We can talk about what's the right context, what's the right way to interpret this all day. I don't care. What I care is the material effects on people today. And Alice and I have both expressed, along with millions of people in this country, along with the clients that Jessica, the sex therapist that is called in earlier, have probably expressed as well, that everyone has had experiences with the culture and the expectations that Christianity has had when it comes to gender roles. And whether or not that's accurate to the Bible, I don't care. It's harmed people. And I want to rectify that harm. What is the Christian church doing about that? I don't know, Jay. You'd have to tell me, because they weren't doing anything for me when I was there.
I'll be gladly some lady could pull my engine and my transmission in my diesel and go ahead and fix that. Go ahead, feel free. I wouldn't stop you. You know what I mean? Go ahead. But you know what? 9 out of 10 women can't do that. Sorry to tell you that, bud. Not to say that they don't have the capability.
Jay, why do you think? Well, let's talk about that. Why do you think the expectation isn't put upon women to make mechanical repairs? Do you believe it's something innate to women?
Okay. Do you think they want to do it?
No, that's not what I asked. Do you think I'm asking about the capacity of a person, right? You're saying that 9 out of 10 women aren't going to do it, whether or not they want to do it. I'm asking, do you think they even can?
I didn't say they couldn't. I said they don't want to work that hard. Sorry to
they don't
want
to work that hard.
But we live in reality. We don't live in a fantasy world like you say that men have vaginas. Man, wake up, bud. I never seen a man with a vagina. Where did you see that at? Tell me. Where did you see a man with a vagina?
Jay, listen, I know that you're asking me questions here, but I'm keeping track. I'm trying to keep track of this conversation so we can go like somewhere with this. I'm talking about like right now. You are talking to me about your expectations of women. Okay, this is my point. You've made the claim that most women don't want to do the hard work, and and where do you get that view from? Is this this world that you think that you've observed in reality, and based on your observations you've come to this conclusion, or is there something else at work here? Because I'm willing to bet that you have an idea of what men and women should be that comes from the Bible, right? And that probably affects your worldview.
I didn't say that. You twisted.
I'm willing to. If you heard me, I said I'm willing to bet that's where it comes from. You can confirm whether that's true or not. But
here we go. I worked in any woman could get a job faster in a man's in construction, in any mechanical shop because they're a woman. And guess what? When they see the physical, the 10-hour days, the 12-hour days, they don't want to do it, bud. Sorry to tell you that.
What the fuck does that have to do with anything we're talking about, Jay? I don't give a fuck what you think about women working in construction jobs. What are you saying? You're saying like women don't want to work hard? Jay,
don't want to do them.
That's a fuck. Jay, that's stupid. Jay, Jay, I don't care. Like, I don't know what your point is here, but you're kind of pissing me off because, like, instead of us having a conversation about where these normative ideas and values come from, you're just making even more generalizations about women. like, do you not see the problem here? You're not even talking about people. You're just talking about stereotypes. I mean, you're not even talking about actual people you've interacted with. You're just saying, oh, all women are acting like this. I mean, why? Where does this come from?
I don't want to do it. Sorry, bud. Majority, you can do it, ladies. I encourage women to go out there and do it. Go ahead. Go and I'll do welding, and it's 116 degrees outside when I'm working in the sun, and I'm welding, and I have leathers on. Come on, ladies, come and help me, please. I'm begging you.
Great, Jay.
We need help.
I'm glad you think that you're the big strong man and only you can do the job, that no other women can do what you do. But I mean, that's frankly not true. Here's my hypothesis, Jay. Maybe it's because women and men have been socialized into working into different fields of work and have different expectations on what kinds of careers they should have based on how they're going to provide for their family, what other people are going to be thinking of them, what kinds of work hours they should be having. There's a lot of these things you should consider. And I'm willing to bet you, Jay, in a more equalized society, in a society that normalizes these kinds of roles and expectations between men and women to be more equal, you're going to see more welders, women welders. You're going to see more women who are interested in car repairs or whatever you were talking about.
Let me ask you this question: if society's not equal, why are they hiring women faster than they're hiring men in construction? Why would they do that? Because
they want to have a more equalized workforce.
Okay, all right. So therefore it is equal, correct?
So the workforce currently isn't equal in terms of gender. No.
Well, you're not going to see it, just because you're just blind to facts. I'm sorry to tell you that, but can I ask you one more question?
What facts am I blind to?
We can go around all day long, but you're not going to see it. Sorry, bud. I'm sorry to tell you that. You're not going to see it.
I don't even know what I'm trying to see right now. What, that I should have this view of women are infantile and can't do manual labor? Like that's the only point I've heard you here so far. Like, I don't even understand. Like, is this what you called in? Do you want to talk about?
No, I didn't want to talk about that. I was talking about the Bible, but you're stuck on women being equal and, which is untrue. So
you're the one that went on a rant about like saying women can fix your car or whatever, man. I don't know. Look, this is a very silly conversation. I'm not used to this kind of talk, but look, I don't know if you ask me a question, I give an answer that you're going to give me a follow-up anyway, but you can try. I'll give you one more time to kind of start to have a conversation with me, but otherwise I think I'm finished here.
Simple question for you and her. How would you feel if you were wrong and there is a hell and you led everybody that you're listening to a burning hell? Hypothetically speaking, how would you feel?
Yeah, I'd wonder why there's a God who claims to be all good and throws his creation into an eternal suffering. I don't think that's on me. I didn't put those people to hell. God did.
Can I get her answer too?
Yeah.
Yeah, my answer, I suppose the first thing that came to my mind was I suppose I feel as bad as I did about how I feel about the people that I tried to bring into Christianity, which ended up being and is really harmful for some people. But to Dan's point, I also look at I think that God is ultimately responsible if there is a God and if there is a hell that he made. I always wondered why people would say that God's love is unconditional, and yet to experience his love in heaven, it was on the condition that we believed in that Jesus died for our sins, which meant a large chunk of the world's population would never get that chance. And so I thought that made God kind of a monster for making a hell that they had no chance of escaping, because the missionaries couldn't get there in time, is what I thought when I was a Christian. And it was like, oh, well, that's, that troubled me deeply about God, that he would make it that way. And it troubles me now, the idea of a God that made it that way.
Yeah, the Bible doesn't say that people that never heard about Christ go to hell. It doesn't say that. Sorry to tell you.
Does Jesus not say that he is the way, the truth, and the life, and that the only way to the Father is through him?
Sure, yeah, but if you never, God is, he's not a monster like you said. He does take things into consideration. He's not just going to, they never heard about me. Sorry, you're going to hell. No, ma'am. Sorry, it doesn't say that in the Bible. But, let me ask this one.
No, but Jay, but you do agree he does put people to hell, though, right? Like he does put people to eternal suffering, eternal conscious suffering.
I agree that you didn't care about none of your callers going to hell, that you led to hell.
Okay, but you agree that they are going to hell. Like that is your opinion.
I've asked a lot of atheists this question, and they've never considered the people that they were leading to hell. Because why?
Well, because we don't think they're actually going to hell, Jay. Like, but here's the thing, right? I'm not taking him there. God is the one that's doing it. That's not on me. He can change the rules. He's God. He doesn't have to do that. What rule about God says that he has to put people to eternal conscious suffering? Hey,
well, what rule does it say that rapists and murderers have to go to prison? What rule is that? Is that the law of the land?
That's man-made laws. But why does God have to put people to eternal conscious suffering?
Should evil people go to prison, or should you just let them roam free?
Well, we don't put them to eternal conscious suffering, though. And if we had the capacity to, I don't think I would. I don't see the reason.
Have you been to prison? Have you been stuck in a cell all by yourself? You go mentally ill, bud. You go crazy.
I don't know what.
So guess what? You get punished for the wrongs that you do. It's very simple. Very simple.
Okay. So, but okay, what is the wrong in not believing in God? Like, honestly, what is the wrong here? What am I doing that's so bad that means I deserve eternal conscious suffering?
Sure. Well, basically, you broke his law, you lied, you stolen, you cheated. It's in your mind. You have hate in your mind, which he considers murder, and God is perfection. So the Bible says that there is none righteous, no, not one righteous. So therefore, we all have broke his laws, and so therefore, either you pick the side that's good, or you're picking the side that's evil. And if you don't pick any side, you're still picking a side. So,
let's break this down.
Simple.
Let's break this down. You have this belief, and you cited that this belief is coming from the Bible, right? This is what the Bible says. So why should we believe what the Bible says to be true?
Because evolution is the biggest lie known to man.
That has nothing to do with the truth of the Bible, right? People have been talking about the truth of the Bible before evolution was even a concept. So why should we believe in the truth of the Bible?
Why should you? Because the Bible is accuracy. It's accurate.
Why? How do we know that? How do we know that the Bible is accurate?
Because you don't know the origin of life. We don't come from monkeys. Every atheist scientist.
Again, my personal view, Jay, I got to interrupt you because my personal view of the origin of life has nothing to do with the veracity of the Bible, right? How do we know that the Bible is truthful and honest?
Like I just said, it's historically, is proven facts. Jesus was a real man, historically.
Okay.
So this,
Okay, so you believe that the Bible is accurate because it describes real historical events. Is that correct?
yes, sir.
Okay,
That's
so
what
if
I'm
someone
saying.
were to show you, so just to clarify, if someone were to show you evidence that the events in the Bible were not depicted accurately to others' understandings of history, in other words, if historians had other evidence that suggested that the events in the Bible did not actually take place, would that change your mind at all about the truthhood of the Bible? Just asking
change
if
your
it were
mind?
true. Not saying it exists. Not saying it exists. Just wondering if it did exist, would it change your mind at all?
I wouldn't. I know atheists are atheists. They lie. Atheist scientists and historians, they lie. So I would definitely be skeptical of them.
Okay.
For sure. You know what I mean? So, but I would.
That's fair.
I would listen. Yeah, 100%.
Okay. That's good to know. That's good to know. So the truthhood of the Bible is based on its historical veracity. In your
Historical.
view. Okay.
Everything.
That's what I need to know, Jay. That's what I need to know to have a conversation with you. So here's where I would take it. And I've been talking a lot. I really want Alice to kind of talk in this conversation as well. Based on my understanding of history, based on my understanding of how the world has come to be from the Big Bang up to now, I don't think the Bible has accurately foretold not only modern history in times of humans, but also ancient history as well. Like if you're talking about Genesis 1, Genesis 2, these kinds of stories, and up to the flood, things like that, I don't believe they actually describe historical events. And the reason why is because of the other fields of study, archaeology, anthropology, geology, other fields of science do not seem to light up with the events of the Bible as they literally depict them, right? So, and this isn't just one field of science or two fields of science, multiple fields of science. And the consensus that has come to from those communities seem to portray a different picture of not only human history, but also Earth's history and the universe's history that are not correspondent with the Bible. And therefore, it causes me to be suspect of the Bible's origins and of its veracity. Because I have to ask myself, how did these people 2,000, sometimes 3,000 years ago, know all this information about the world? Where did they get their information from? It would have to be either a divine source or something else, because they didn't witness a lot of these events. These are people writing from oftentimes different time periods, right? The people who wrote the book of Genesis did not actually live in the times that Genesis we're talking about. They're hearing stories from somewhere. So they're either hearing it from other people or they're just made up. That's the only real conclusion I can come to without having any sort of divine intervention in play, Jay. So that's really and sincerely the reason why I don't share the worldview that you have.
But you know, you have to study everything. You know what I mean, till this day, kids still memorize the Torah. Till to this day, kids still memorize the Quran. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's not common over here in America, but over in the Middle East, that is very common. So, and I understand that there is multiple events that will coincide with the Bible all around the world, in China, Mexico, everywhere, you name it, of the flood. And, you know, everything's not going to be exactly the same.
I disagree.
And I don't want it to be. If everything was the same, I'd be a bigger skeptic. So
I understand.
I
understand. You know, we really don't have any more time for this conversation, unfortunately. We do have some other callers we need to get to, Jay. But maybe on a different conversation, we can talk about what sources you view when it comes to what you seem to be talking about, the flood story in the Bible there. I'd like to explore that with you. But for now, we've just been going on this call for a really long time. We really got to talk to some other people. So I am going to let you go. But thank you, Jay, for calling in. And I hope to hear from you again sometime. Alice, I'm so sorry. I've been talking a lot in this conversation.
No, it's all good. The only other thing that I would add to that is that if you look at, there's a lot of Christians who are also archaeologists and scientists who can agree that the Bible large parts of it were plagiarized from other previous existing texts and other spiritual things. So it's not just atheist scientists or historians. I don't blame you for not trusting them. I wouldn't either when I was a Christian. But there are plenty Christian historians and scientists who can also present these facts to you, as you like to call them, facts.
Yeah, I agree. And the next step in that conversation, I think, would have to be talking about what sources we're looking at. Where are we getting this information? Because we can talk about the Bible and what it says, but then I want to look at what academic journals are saying and what methods these people are using to come to these conclusions, and compare that to the methods that the authors of the Bible used in their conclusions. And I have to say, I don't know the methods that the people in the Bible used, because they don't say it. Sometimes it's just off the top of their head, it seems like. Sometimes it's from oral traditions. You can look at that and you can talk about which is more likely to be true. But anyway, we have a quick promo that we need to show you guys, talking about some of the other shows that we have here at the ACA. So check that out.
If I have a mindful, healthy relationship, that means we don't bring in our own shame or issues or react disproportionately. It's like, oh no, you still get to be two humans colliding together, which is a shit show, and hopefully it goes as well as possible.
I mean, if I had to pick one, I'd probably take that Roman wine god, Bacchus, I think his name is.
Oh, that's new to me, but yeah, that sounds pretty good.
He'd be a cool deity, man. Those Romans had some gods that knew how to party.
I wouldn't be comfortable with any religious institution doing it, Let's take the opportunity to just talk more about, I don't know, math or reading. I mean, we could
use science.
Or
science.
It seems like that's what you believe, Frank, or whoever your name is.
My name is not Frank. We'll call me. I'll be Frank. Let me be Frank. Okay, I'll be Frank. Let me be frank with you. Okay, Patrick.
Just listening to you guys has brought me up, and I needed that.
Good. Go give that man a good squeeze on the hand. Let him know that none of us here are praying for him, but all of us can't wait until he walks out of the hospital to tell his story.
And we're back to the funsies. We still got some great calls, I think, that I want to take. We might go a little longer than normal today, Alice. Is that okay with you if we do that? Because I want to try to get to everybody today if we can. So thank you guys who have been patiently waiting. That last conversation took a while, but you know what? I'm kind of glad it did, because man, we went some places there. I mean,
we went some places. We went to mechanic shops. We went to
women in mechanic shops.
History.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I cannot fucking wait for the comment sections to come out of women welders and women auto mechanics who are just going to be like, man, fuck that. But anyway, that'll be after this episode is posted, I'm sure. So we got some other people that want to talk to us. Let's talk first to Adam, who's calling in from North Carolina. Adam, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Alice and Objectively Dan. I just have to make I cannot follow up with that last call and give it justice and give you as much entertainment. But if you go back in time really quickly, 50 years, and you look at the veterinary industry, it'd be all men. And you'd say, man, look at these men doing veterinary work. It's men doing work. And now you go to the future and it's women. So it's just norms in society that there's no rhyme or reason. Go ahead, Dan.
Absolutely. I was about to say, look at teachers, right? Teaching was supposed to be a male profession. It literally says in the Bible that women aren't even allowed to teach in the church, because that's too sacred. And let alone in education in America, it was almost purely men. And you see these switches and roles. So yeah, I agree. His point was bullshit. So we find some common ground there, Adam. What do you want to talk to us about today?
Well, sure, and thank you so much for taking my call, and thank you, Alice, for being on the show. My call is related to kind of that caller is misusing science in many ways on the Christian side.
Adam, no. Really? You think so?
Okay, good. I thought I was being a little too harsh on this, but a little hard to read the cues from you. But I think there's also some misuse of science, and I'll go into why on the atheist side. And my topic is that atheists are constantly misusing the null hypothesis in statistics. Constantly. It drives me crazy. It grinds my gears.
Okay, elaborate on that.
Sure. So the null hypothesis in statistics is basically any initial belief. Any initial belief. Your crazy friend, let's call them Nathan, might believe the world is flat. A crazy belief. So that could be their null hypothesis. It's just what they believe. Now, you would offer to them an alternative hypothesis. And one of the big problems why I think it's being used by the kind of supernatural claims is because we have to be able to test it to come to a p-value. A p-value is the probability of our results or results from our strain given that the null hypothesis is true. So if you were to present to your friend Nathan experiments that would show, you know, like the Cavendish experiment. I'm not the best flat earth debater. But if you presented experiments that showed evidence the earth is not flat, you wouldn't disprove. So we wouldn't say we disprove the earth is flat. We would say there's sufficient evidence to reject the null hypothesis. So we never really prove the null. We don't disprove the null. We only reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. So it's kind of shoring up some wording. It kind of just, I don't know your thoughts or Alice's thoughts on this, but every time I hear people being like, the null hypothesis is atheism, or we don't have any burden of proof. The burden of proof is another conversation, but the null hypothesis just really drives me crazy when it's used.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So I briefly taught statistics as a tutor for a while. Well, parts, I mean, I taught up to like pre-calculus and like related stuff. So like I didn't go into the high concept stuff, like talking about the null hypothesis. I mostly like tutored for high school students and middle school students. But like, you're absolutely right. People misuse this all the time when they're talking about the null hypothesis, when we're talking about things that are more likely to be true. We're exactly talking about that. We're talking about what we expect to see versus what we actually see. That's really what we mean, right? So there's some that will argue that, well, we don't even know what it would be like to know whether there is a God or not. And so this whole null hypothesis argument really kind of falls apart if you have that viewpoint. There's, things to suggest about particular kinds of gods that you can work with. So if you have a God that, maybe exists, but also like creates the physical world in the way that we tend to see it today, and like, follows the normal rules that we think of and has no supernatural intervention, that's going to be different than the God that we expect to see intervening, right? And actually doing things in the world. So then you might be able to use, something with the null hypothesis in the sense of expected outcome versus what's actually observed. But again, it all depends on how you define God and what kind of God you're talking about, because they are going to be a bit different there. What you think about that, Alice?
Yeah.
What I hear, so I'm not familiar with the null hypothesis, if I'm even pronouncing that correctly, but what I hear is it sounds to me, just off of the snippet, it sounds to me kind of like the opposite of saying that the burden of proof rests with the person who is claiming something. What I'm hearing you say about the null hypothesis is it's kind of the opposite, like the burden of proof rests on the person who's saying that there is not something. Am I interpreting that correctly or no?
No, I think I can use your example, your kind of story. It was great hearing some of your story and coming out as an actress. So when going way back into the early 2000s, let's say 04 or 05, you believed, in God at that time. And so you started to then see evidence that maybe your beliefs were wrong. And at some point you rejected your belief. But now you would consider yourself an atheist. So now your null hypothesis would be atheism. And let's say all of a sudden Dan performed a miracle in front of you, right? Dan, can you do a miracle for us? I think the answer is no.
Oh, Dan, you lost your sound.
That was the miracle. It's the miracle of silence from Dan. I'm just kidding. But if Dan were to perform some sort of miracle or something, if Dan were to perform some sort of miracle, that might be sufficient evidence for you to reject your new null hypothesis. So basically the idea is you hold to your belief until there's sufficient evidence to reject your current belief. And then whatever your new belief is, like now it's atheism, that's kind of your current null hypothesis. Like it's just what you currently believe. And then other people have to offer you. Go ahead.
So I think I understand you. So a distinction that I'd like to make is I'm quite literal with my use of the English language. And atheism to me and to the dictionary literally means just a, without, theism, belief in gods or deities. I don't have belief. To me, atheism is the complete absence of belief. So I wouldn't say that I believe in atheism now, and that's become what I would base my null hypothesis on. It's the utter absence of belief. I don't think, I think that there's a spectrum of atheists, just as there's a spectrum of Christians in terms of how fundamentalist or liberal one might find themselves. I lean more in the side of an agnostic atheist. I think everyone's agnostic because who really knows, but I'm comfortable with the term atheist because I don't know, but I don't believe in gods or spirits. And I think that there's like agnostic Christians, agnostic Scientologists. They don't know for sure, but that's what they believe. And so that's what I would say to that is like, I don't think that atheism is a belief system at all. And I know many people see it as like, oh no, that's just a different religion. You know, now you believe that there is no God. To me, there's a very big difference between saying, I believe there is no God and I don't believe in a God. I'm not saying that there is no God. I just don't believe in one. So I'm not asserting anything up for that would require evidence to back, because to me, it's an absence of something, not a proposition of something.
Real quick, Dan, if I can comment on that, because, and that's exactly right there, Alice, because the null hypothesis requires no evidence. You have no burden. Anyone who offers you an alternative hypothesis must present the data that would not be in line with your null hypothesis, some very unlikely data. Dan, I don't know if you performed miracles while you were on mute, but
I actually did. I did, and I was talking about it. And Adam, you're going to have to watch because I didn't realize I was on mute as I did it. But please go back and watch. I did perform a miracle. Okay.
Well,
but
that might be sufficient evidence to convince us.
And it might be, but
perfect. Go ahead.
On that point, Adam, you know, again, that's defining. Again, the parameters there, which is like, well, if God exists, then we would expect to see miracles in the population, right? Like that's how we're kind of defining things, and that's a very like Christian way to, you know, understand the world. Again, there could be a God that exists, but their miracles may or may not be a part of what we would expect to see, right? So like, you know, I think I agree with you in the sense that using the null hypothesis is often misused. I think it can be useful in some sense, but again, this is why I call myself an atheist, right? We can't even have this conversation about God without even defining what that even is or what we would even expect to see in the world. Like we were just having that conversation with Jay, and he was disagreeing about what Christianity really is and what the Bible really says and what we're supposed to be. And people were having these conversations about Christianity every single day. Nobody can figure out what the hell it's supposed to be, because it was all made up anyway. But that's, you know, besides the point, right? I agree. If we're going to have conversations about this in atheist circles, we do need to use our words as accurately as possible. So I appreciate you bringing up your point regardless. Any last thoughts before we get? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I just want to thank you for taking my call and appreciate all your service. I heard you mentioning the Secular Therapy Project to people. But I think you summed it up well there where you said, you know, the distribution we would expect is for miracles to occur. We are outside the range of that distribution, i.e. a low p-value. So we have sufficient evidence via the alpha level 0.5 to reject the null hypothesis of theism. I agree with you.
You're exactly right.
Thank you for your time.
Yes, absolutely, Adam. I 100% agree. And that is how I think most Christians define God in sort of the reality that we exist in insofar as miracles exist, right? Miracles happen. There are, but even then, there's post-cessationalists. There's people that say, well, we don't live in a world where miracles happen anymore because of X, Y, and Z. You know, there's theological reasons, and so we would is more likely that God is real because this is how we would expect the world to be. You know, there's weird trains of thought you can go with these conversations. But yeah, I agree. People do misuse the null hypothesis because statistics is hard. It's not an easy subject to learn for most people. But anyway, thoughts on that, Alice?
No, I'm going to be Googling the null hypothesis later just to understand it better.
It's a thing people bring up. Like if we're saying the God of Christianity that exists and Jesus exists and therefore miracles exist, but we don't see miracles, then we can say that maybe we shouldn't have as strong of a belief in these things existing, right? The same reason why I don't think the Mormons are right, because like I don't think any of the shit Mormons say is happening. Like you could talk about this with multiple kinds of religious ideas. But with that out of the way, I do want to give another quick plug to the membership option. You may have noticed some people are using some custom emojis in the chat, and that is because they are members on the channel. So if you want to become a member on the channel, you can hit that join button and do that. We have all the other hosts' faces on there, as well as the Truth Wanted logo. So thank you to everybody who are members on the YouTube channel. And I said that I want to go a little over time today. Usually we got about 5 more minutes, but I want to extend things today because today's just a wacky episode. There's a lot of things happening on all fronts. So let's continue if you're ready for that, Alice.
Yeah. Thanks again for calling, Adam.
Yes, thanks again for calling with that topic, Adam. For now, let's try to get to another call. We're talking to is it Jan from Michigan? Please correct me if that is not correct.
No, that's
Jan
correct. Jan, J-A-N.
Awesome. Jan from Michigan. How are you doing?
Hi, Dan. Hi, Alice.
Hi.
Good, thank you. Good. It's nice to meet you both. I hadn't seen your show before, but it came up my YouTube feed, and then there's this poll question on there about astrology. So I answered it, and it said, "Oh yes," and I'll call in. So I called in.
Fuck yeah, that's what we like to hear.
Astrology. And by the way, it's Jan. It's definitely not Jay. I'm Jay opposite. Okay, so
cool.
I'm opposite of Jay. Yeah, it's I came to was a Christian, was a Catholic, grew up. I have a bad joke about that when you mentioned the Boy Scouts. I would joke that my mother wouldn't let me be a Boy Scout. She said, "You don't need it. You're a Catholic. You have priests to molest you."
Oh my God.
That's a dark joke, but I appreciate
Jesus
it.
Christ. Like,
yeah,
you say that, but also like the same American like representatives for a lot of these cases for like the Catholic Church are also used in like the Boy Scout cases and stuff. So like there's like there's some dark ties there. But yeah, moving on from that.
I say I should probably drop that joke just because of the age of time's gone by, and unfortunately never happened to me. But but anyway, the critical thinking is what happened to me. I started to embrace critical thinking for a lot of pseudoscience and a lot of conspiracy stuff, and the more of that started to ring, the more and more Christianity and all of these things just started saying, no, this just doesn't hold up to any kind of critical thinking.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the way that went. On where all those things had come from. But when I first got on hold, you were talking to Jessica, the sex therapist, and that was a really interesting conversation. And I was thinking about it at the time. So I'm going to be 62 this month. Growing up in Chicago,
Oh, I just said happy birthday.
What was it? Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Growing up in Chicago,
my parents were divorced. My mother, and my mother was a single parent with a long-term boyfriend. By the way, single parent, no welder, but I'd like to see any welder go in and wait tables for 8-10 hours and see what that's like. It's sure. But anyway, her long-term boyfriend had. And these are adult people. These are, I was the youngest of 9, so this was not, these weren't young kids. He grew up in a fairly, very conservative family and had a lot of sexual hang-ups that came out of this. And, you know, many years later, as an adult, my mom confided with me that this man, I'll leave his name out of it just in case anyone hears my voice in there. His approach to sex was to have her go to bed out of sleep, and then he would come in and start his business while she was asleep.
Oh my God!
Routinely, yeah, and my mom's take on that was that he was not particularly, you know, talented, or felt he didn't have performance and long-term lasting stuff. So it was in his mind as if he was, oh, you missed all the good stuff because you were sleeping, you know, as a way of compensating for what he felt was a lack of performance ability, which is just but you just wonder, how does a person, you know, how do you live with a mind like that and not want to fix it and not want to say, I got to tear this apart and get my mind straight, because this is no way to go through life.
I agree, Jen. Like, you know, the Bible and Christianity has never upheld the value of consent. Never. You know, you can talk about what the Bible says about men and women all you want. You're not going to find any verses that say consent should be held above all else. It's not a thing that was around in that time, I suppose. I mean, like, I'm sure there are people who probably had an idea of it, but it wasn't codified in Christianity. And it's a secular concept that has come about since then. It really has, and it's really sad the way people treat the relationships and treat these, ideas of what they should be like and who has the right to do what with other people's bodies. Like, you tell me that story, and I hear a story of spousal rape. I mean, that's what I'm hearing. You know. But I don't know. They may not see it in those terms, and that's terrifying. That is awful. But like, that shit is still happening today. Like, that's, you know, we talk about the story that happened a long time ago, but I guarantee you there's Christian couples right now that are going through that, you know, and maybe not exclusively Christian ones, but like, it does happen in those communities, and it's very terrible.
Right. Well, and then I wasn't where I wasn't going on that. I respect that certainly could come to mind, but you know, I go from my mother's telling of it, and the, you know, the consent issue was never really the part of the story there. That was not the issue. It was to her, she was expressing that he seemed to be so insecure in his own performance ability that he wanted to create a scenario where, you know, she had missed all the good action because she was sleeping when it began. And so all she got was the finish, you know.
That's completely foreign to me. I'll be honest.
It is. And then on that same person, so some years later, I'm some years older, and we're with a group of us in a car, including the youngest of 9 kids. There's 2 older sisters who are, you know, many years older than me. I'm probably 14 or 15, and they're older, and Bob's in the car. So there's like 5 of us in this crammed in this car, and we're going someplace, and the women were making cracks about sex, just lighthearted ones, you know. And you know, some entertainer had been recently on, whatever it was, you know, Burt Reynolds was in centerfold of Cosmo. Anyways, is it some sexual, you know, jokes are being made, and the man says, "Oh, I liked it better in the old days when women didn't like sex."
Yeah, because women used to not like sex. That's for sure.
They laughed hysterically at this, you know, and my mom's like, "Oh, come on, we always liked sex. We just never told you guys."
Yeah,
because it was socially unpleasant, you know. And so that's the same. It's from the same things, from this patriarchal. Yeah. You know, women can't be sexually aroused and sexually, you know, promiscuous. It can't be these things because that's unladylike. That's, you know, it falls in the same thing with genital mutilation amongst women too. It's just take away their desires.
Yeah,
so that they don't have these things.
Yeah, like again, going back to what the Bible says about men and women is that like you always have to be on the lookout for men because they are the ones with this like sexual desire. Actually, well, I take that back. There are stories of like women being sexual temptresses and stuff like that. So I'll say that much. But like, yeah, there's definitely this weird idea that is perpetuated in the culture that says that women don't enjoy sex, that sex is purely for the enjoyment of a man, and that's only because like I don't know, people have made it that way. It doesn't have to be that way. You can definitely change that. But Jan, I do have to let you go at this point because we are already over time on the show, and I want to talk to some other people. But thanks again for your call, and thanks for your stories there. Those were entertaining to listen to. I appreciate you calling in and watch. Listen, you folks, this has happened a couple times now in the past few weeks. You folks who are watching the show for the very first time and are like, yeah, I'm just gonna fucking call this dude. Like y'all are something else. Shout outs to you guys. I wouldn't do that personally. That's not my style, but hey, more power to you, I suppose. Alice, any thoughts on that call?
No, I was kind of curious where he was going to go with the astrology bit, but then it took a turn that I didn't expect, and I wasn't sure where it was going.
I wasn't sure where it was going either, but there were some interesting anecdotes in there about people and how they communicate with this stuff. I mean, the stories that he's talking about are that's outside of the traditional theology. That's outside of what's codified. Again, it's just what people say, and that's like the culture that people grow up in. And I think it's important to talk about these conversations where it's like, yeah, okay, maybe the Bible doesn't explicitly say these things that you believe, but you believe them anyway. And that culture is almost codifying it in its own way. So anyway, interesting stuff there. But I want to talk to just one more person today, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up the show. We're going to talk to Drew, who's calling in from Washington. Drew, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
Hi. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about a couple things, but like my main thing was about how like incest in the Bible and stuff would not be physically like possible, and like but I also want to like quickly touch bases with the other stuff you guys will talk about afterwards. So I'll just go quickly through the incest one.
Okay.
So yeah, it happens a lot in the Bible. Like literally the first thing, Adam and Eve or whatever, Eve is apparently literally like a part of his DNA. So like that's already a problem. Like intersex people literally can't even intersex people have problems, and sometimes they die depending on the type because they can't like have like children with themselves if they have both like sets of genitalia or whatever, it causes their body to like spaz out basically. So that's already a problem. And then there's another one where very early in the Bible, it was early in Genesis and stuff, like right after like the like whole Sodom got obliterated by God, Lot was drugged by his two daughters and raped by them, and then they had two kids that basically like became great nations or whatever, and it's like, okay, there was this one family in Kentucky that ended up being like isolated. I'm pretty sure it's Kentucky. I might not be right on the state, but it's basically in that area. Pretty sure it's Kentucky, but they ended up having to like, in order to survive, they had to like do a lot of incest, and it caused them to have blue skin. And you don't see people like walking around with blue skin necessarily, And there's other things, like some people will claim that like if you have just one man and like 20 women or something, that's totally fine. But then that's a lot of half siblings. And then possibly like other things, going on, like parents and children too. And that's like not good at all, genetically or morally. But it'd be like you probably need at least 5 to 10 men at the least. But yeah, like there's a whole bunch of like stuff that's wrong with that. And like even like lions in Asia that were like so few in the numbers, they would like do incest because there was barely any lions there, and it ended up like their bodies ended up naturally aborting it because it couldn't handle it. So yeah, that's like the whole incest thing. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, Drew, I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of incest stories in the Bible that, if taken at face value, don't seem to make sense. As you've mentioned before, specifically, you mentioned lion populations, but current cheetah populations right now, as we see them, are very are genetically identical, because they had kind of a stopgap in their a bottlenecking in their population at some point in their history, and that's why we see some of the genetic abnormalities that come out of that today, because you need a population that has diverse genetic inputs in order to have diverse genetic outputs. Otherwise, you're going to have breed of similar stock. We say the same thing about humans. I believe the date is about 70,000 years ago, where there was a bottlenecking of human species as well, that anthropologists have come to today. But I was never a person, Drew, that actually literally believed in those stories. For the most part, I think I kind of had a more progressive understanding that maybe these were just kind of allegories about wider things. I don't know what I really believe, but yeah, I mean, if you ask the average Christian what they might say of that, some of them will say, well, during that time, God protected them from genetic abnormalities. That's it. And that it only came later, or they'll just kind of have these what are called post hoc rationalizations that don't really make a lot of sense when we look at it from a modern scientific worldview. Alice, what do you think?
Yeah, it makes me think, when I was a kid, I was fixated on the Cain and Abel story, and how thinking like, oh, so they had to mate with their mom. Yeah. And my dad being like, no, they didn't do that. Like, by then there were more. And it says, the one that left Cain, right? The one that left, he like went to go populate a different thing. And so it's just assumed that there were other people in existence by that time. And I always wondered, like, but where did they come from though? Like how long, like how many cousins, like how many siblings was Cain doing to keep it going? But it's not unique to the Bible, to Judaism or Christianity. In ancient Egypt, and even in present day, the British monarchy, the British queen right now is married to, I think, her second cousin, is it? But like in monarchies and in religions throughout time, it's thought, the goal is to keep the bloodline pure. And what we know now is that it actually it's not good to keep it pure in that sense. It actually leads to a lot of impurities. And like you were saying, like automatic abortions, spontaneous abortions, that's the term I'm looking for, miscarriages, because it's not a viable fetus. But yeah, I think it's definitely very interesting to observe incest. And I've thought, another thought that I've had is like, it seems like incest and bestiality are kind of like the last taboos that we've begun exploring in cinema. Kind of, I mean, Game of Thrones with the sibling relationship there is kind of exploring it, but it's interesting like how it's timeless. Incest is kind of timeless, and obviously problematic for many reasons.
That's an interesting. Incest is timeless. Alice Greczyn.
Timeless. Take with that what you will. I'm not saying it's okay, but it's
no. But I know what you mean. It's
a
recurring theme.
Yeah.
In not just like Judaism and Christianity, and obviously Islam as well, but like other cultures outside the West too have opinions about incest. Like a lot of them thinking like, yes, this is how you keep this bloodline pure, which is really interesting, but of course doesn't line up with what we know today about some of the effects of what happens when you do that. So Drew, you're on the money. You definitely have some good observations there that you should definitely challenge other people around you to see what they come up with, because their answers are probably not going to be very good. What do you think, Drew?
Yeah. I want to expand on the purity thing, because you know how people, like in the past, until more recently, like especially, would just like breed dogs with their siblings or their grandparents or whatever, because they wanted purebreds, and it actually has caused a lot of problems. Like in German Shepherds, they have hip problems. In pugs, my dog is half pug, and even though he doesn't have the like squash nose, he still has some respiratory issues because of that. And even though it like lessened because of like the like two different dog breeds being mushed together, both my dogs are like mutts, by the way, but like even though they were mushed together. It did like reduce it, because it has been found in mutts to reduce the issues a lot with that, because of, you know, all the like inbreeding a lot, so much that causes these problems. And it like reduces them when you like get them with different breeds.
Yep. And that's
one of my dogs,
what
River, she, oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, that's what selective breeding, that's when we had the choice of deciding who these partners were for animals and stuff. So yeah, it can ultimately become a very cruel system. So yeah, that, I mean, like that right there, first of all, is evidence of evolution, which you should point out for people always, but also like, yeah, can again, just expands on your point, right? Like makes you question what these stories really mean when they say that these incestual relationships exist, not just in Adam and Eve, but in other parts of the Bible as well. You know, Lot's daughters and, you know, other stories too. Yeah. But Drew, I'm sorry I have to kind of cut you short. We are already over time. I think I've got about all the time I can have right now with going overtime, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and let you go. But thanks for calling in with your call and talking about what you wanted to talk about. It is an interesting sort of through line through the Bible, isn't it, Alice? All the incest. It's quite a bit.
Yes.
More than you'd expect when you first like dive into it, right?
And under discussed.
Under discussed. Yeah. I don't think people want to think about the implications there, you know? But anyway, we are at the tail end of the show. I want to give a very, very, very special thanks to Alice for being on the show today. Alice, you are a wonderful, wonderful guest. And despite some of our technical difficulties, you managed to keep on keeping on. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yes. And so where can people find you at if they want to see more of you?
So I'm most active on Instagram. I update Twitter occasionally. My website is just alicegretchen.com. If you're interested in checking out my book, Wayward, you can get it at alicegretchen.com/book. You can also just find it on Amazon or wherever books are sold online. Another little project that I've been doing is on Substack. I've been writing short stories about my time as an actor, and a lot of those stories include my deconstruction and the times where I was confronted with the problems and flaws in my faith through my experiences in the entertainment industry. And so it's kind of a combination of like scandalous little tell-all behind the scenes stories combined with my very, very wretched wrestling with faith in this particular LA setting. So yeah, read those if that interests you, and that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Awesome. And I also want to point out just another way you can support the atheist community of Austin. If you see on the YouTube page, there's going to be a big button that says donate. If you do that, that money goes straight to the ACA. The Atheist Community of Austin is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, meaning YouTube does not get a cut of that money. So if you want to support the show, that's another way to do it. We thank you to everybody who supports the show in all the different ways that you do. You guys rock. I want to point out that, again, myself and most of the crew and all the other hosts, we're all volunteers that help make this project happen. So by donating there, you're just making sure that the mission for spreading positive atheism and promoting the separation of church and state keeps happening. So thank you to everybody that does that. I want to give a very special thank you to the wonderful, fantastic, amazing, spectacular crew that helps make this show happen every single week. And they got the merch on right now. They also help whenever things don't quite go the way that we expect them to. And also shout outs to Elliot for filling in there for a little bit too. He got a guest promo on today's show. So thank you for doing that, Elliot. Alice, we are now at the end of the show. Do you have any words of wisdom that you want to give us before we wrap things up?
Words of wisdom.
Words of wisdom.
Words of wisdom. Probably nothing that viewers here haven't heard before, but to me, the most wise thing you can do is question everything. I think that type of wisdom keeps one humble, it keeps one curious and in a constant state of wonder and healthy skepticism. And so for me, that's the best way to aspire to being a wise human.
Ooh, I like the way that you kind of gave a subtle. You landed gracefully there at the end.
Thank you.
Words. It was
glad you saw that.
yeah. It was awesome. It was like watching a ballet. I just want to point out as well that another way you can support the show is by going on the Truth Wanted Facebook fan page. So please check that out if you haven't already. We'd love to talk to you more there. And I also want to point out that this show is a part of the Atheist Experience Network, where you can find all of the other shows like Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen, and Secular Sexuality, which I may or may not be making an appearance on pretty soon. So look forward to that. If you want to email me, it's truth@atheist-community.org. And you can follow me on Twitter @ObjectivelyDan. We are at the end of the show. Thank you to everybody who got to be involved, all the callers, all the crew, and Alice. You guys are awesome. Remember to always keep wanting the truth. And I'll see you next time.
Watch The Non-Prophets and join the hosts in the live chat, Sundays at 3 p.m. Central, between the Atheist Experience and Talk Heathen. Visit tiny.cc/YTNP.